Well, we're back somewhat for not necessarily the third hour, but for a little bonus coverage with the Collins brothers, who have been on with us for 2 hours, and I thank them for staying with us a little bit longer. And guys, will you permit me to let me see. There's something that's been on my mind. I've been looking around, and I don't know if I hope I didn't guess it. There's something I want to read to you and get your take on it. Okay, are you ready for this?
Sure.
All right. I'm going to say up front that this was written in 1944, okay?
Right.
It was a free verse poem by Robinson Jeffers. Does that author ring a bell at all?
Vaguely.
All right, but when you hear this, I think you'll understand why. And every so often I go back to this because who could have said it better? Very short poem, free verse, Robinson Jeffers, 1944. It's titled, Be Angry at the Sun. He says that public men publish falsehoods is nothing new. That America must accept, like the historical republic's corruption and empire, has been known for years. Be angry at the sun for setting if these things anger you. Watch the wheel slope and turn. They are all bound on the wheel, these people, those warriors, this republic, Europe, Asia. Observe them gesticulating, observe them going down. The gang serves lies. The passionate man plays his part. The cold passion for truth hunts in no pack. You are not Catullus, you know, to lampoon these crude sketches of Caesar. You are far from Dante's feet, but even farther from his dirty political hatreds. And this is the kicker, guys. Let boys want pleasure, and men struggle for power, and women perhaps for fame, and the servile to serve a leader, and the dupes to be duped. Yours is not theirs. I think it's pretty heavy.
Yeah.
And this was Robinson Jeffers was also a Japanese translator, and I got to believe that when he wrote this, and I have no backing for this at all, this is just summation or speculation, that in 1944 he was a person who watched two nations that he might have loved very much at each other's throats, knowing that there really are no winners. So anyway, that is Be Angry at the Sun by Robinson Jeffers. If you get a chance to take a look at that, that's fine.
Yeah. And
actually, I came upon that, believe it or not, as an epigraph in one of the chapters of the book Fear and Loathing on the Campaign Trail, 1972, by Hunter S. Thompson. Have you ever read that book, guys?
No, I've read some of the one that he wrote, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas.
That's the good stuff.
He was a tough act to follow, and he was trying to tell people certain things about the inner workings of the power elite and of elite criminality. And as a matter of fact, most people probably don't know this, but he had played a role in the whole Franklin cover-up that John DeCamp wrote about. And I'll go on record saying it right now. I don't believe that his death was
a suicide.
It was a suicide. No, I do not. I don't believe that it was. I believe that it goes back into the whole Franklin debacle, and I think that it goes back into what he knew about that whole thing. And he basically was trying to let people know in his own eccentric way what was going on.
Yeah, I think one of his most brilliant insights also was concerning the 60s counterculture. Of course, Thompson did more than his fair share of narcotics, but he basically said that Timothy Leary's crusade to expand people's consciousness through the dissemination of LSD resulted in the emergence of a generation of, I'm loosely paraphrasing him here, but if I'm not mistaken, he used the words mental invalids, and it's very, very much true because today the boomers the boomers were ineffective in their grassroots mobilization against the establishment that they so hated, and as a result, the establishment has firmly embedded itself within the American government. And ironically, many of the boomers have joined them. The Clintons, President Bill Clinton, is one case in point.
And also, it should be noted that that not only did the boomers become, by and large, mental invalids, but when that's what you are, that's what springs from you. And the success of generations, the Gen Xers and the whatnot that the boomers gave birth to are invalids to a large extent. There was a Pew research poll that came out just recently that said that 68% of the baby boomers were giving financial assistance of some sort to their grown children. And now I know that such pop icon figures on the stage of popular culture today, such as Philip McGraw, who's been on Oprah and has his own show, Dr. Phil, on television, would like to have us believe that that's simply because this generation and this younger generation is experiencing a phenomenon known as the Peter Pan syndrome. They simply don't want to grow up and all, but that's not the case at all. The truth is that they do not know how to grow up, and their parents could not teach them how to grow up because they themselves
did not grow up.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Look at me.
Well, there's some good ones out there. There's lots of good people amongst the boomer generation, but there's a large section of that whole generation that just they followed Leary's advice. They tuned out and tuned in, and they've been there ever since.
Yeah.
What's interesting also in that whole scenario. And again, this is the fodder for, boy, I tell you what, we could do volumes on this. But I think it was Tom Wolfe who captured that whole essence in the book about Kesey, the electric Kool-Aid acid test, where Kesey never trusted Leary. He thought he was compromised, and Kesey may in fact have been right. And I don't know that Kesey wasn't compromised, but it seemed that when they went east, and to go to the high priest of whatever, that they found Leary lacking, if you will, and were very disappointed in what they found in the east as they headed back to the Kesey's place on the bus that was called Further.
Well, Leary admits in his own writings that Huxley, who was part of an oligarchical dynasty, had wanted him to go about with drug dissemination to become, quote-unquote, a cheerleader for evolution. So we know that while he might not have wittingly done so, he was, in fact, doing the work of the oligarchs, because Huxley, Aldous Huxley, was part of an oligarchical dynasty going back to T.H. Huxley, who was the bulldog for Darwin, and,
that's right,
and was himself involved in the Freemasonic Lodge, and was one of the people that were instrumental in getting the occult doctrine of becoming accepted by people under the scientific guise of evolution.
Yeah.
You know, I've just written an article and I have to do a follow-up, and so I'm going to get a lot of hate mail locally. In these articles I write for a local paper whose managing editor is a Christian, and he's willing to go to the Post about this, and I congratulate him. There may come a time when they have to cut me free because of so much resentment. But, we talk about things, I write things, he puts them up there, and he has the courage to stand for them, and I appreciate that. They do wind up on my website in the Z-Files. But, Freemasonry, people throw that around, and people who have no idea are saying, like, what are you knocking the Masons for? And we have to... Do we not make the distinction that the Blue Lodge Masons, the first 3 degrees, the guys down the corner, do a lot of good and may not know, as Pike said, that they would be veiled from understanding what the higher degrees do, especially in the Scottish Rite branch of Masonry? Are we agreed so far?
Oh, absolutely. And it should also be said that the lodge was an incubator for a lot of ideational contagions, and once the chicks had hatched and had gone forward, there was very little use for the incubator anymore, and as a result, you can go across this country and find several lodges where it's very much benign, and you don't even see the Freemasonic philosophy taught very much, and it's mostly just a meeting hall and a place for guys to get together, because we're now living in, by and large, a post-Freemasonic age where the doctrine was already formed within the lodges and then dispersed to the society at large, and so now you don't need it as much as you used to.
Yes, if I'm not mistaken, a Freemason who's part of the Turkish Grand Lodge by the name of Eisendag wrote that many men espouse ideology that is Masonic, but have never been members of the Masonic Lodge. And the reason that is because the Masonic Lodge, one of its primary roles was to disseminate this doctrine and to basically inculcate the rest of the surrounding culture into the doctrine. And now that's what Paul means when he calls this a post-Masonic era. That which was within the Masonic Lodge, that which was secret, has now been externalized. And so now that the Masonic Lodge has acted as a transmission belt for those ideas and everything, now it'll kind of sink into the background, and with those ideas floating around within people's head, you'll see the realization and the tangible enactment of Masonic goals.
All right, now clear me up on this. Are you saying necessarily that? Well, okay. Let me say this. I believe that the high degree Freemasonry is basically satanic.
Absolutely.
All right. Why would that pass away?
I'm not saying that it's passed away.
Okay.
I'm saying that there are lodges that are out there right now that just they don't really they've become nominal in their approach to the Masonic doctrine.
It's essentially the same. It's analogous to a church. You have some Christian churches that are lukewarm for Jesus, whereas you have others that are more true to the Scriptures. Likewise, with Masonry, you have that marginal sect, and then you have the inner and more deeply hidden hardcore group of Masons.
Yeah, you have churches that are on. You'll have churches that are really alive and on fire for Jesus Christ, and then you'll have other churches that just use Jesus Christ as a pretext for the creation of a social club under the appellation of church, and that's what you have today. Nowadays, you have lodges that are still very, very fanatical about Masonic doctrine, and then you'll have other lodges where they don't really. I mean, they're only nominally, interested in what Freemasonry teaches by and large, and it's become mostly a social club for them, and it's a social gathering for those people. Mostly with middle class folk, with common person. That's who I'm referring to.
I think the days of the Masonic revolutionary, as we're seen in the Age of Enlightenment, I don't think we're going to see that any longer. Now, does that mean that there's still not a satanic hierarchy to the organization? No, of course there is. However, though, since the lodge has has emptied its content, so to speak, the contents of its doctrine, and inculcated the rest of the surrounding culture, there's no need for it to serve a revolutionary role as it did in, say, revolutionary France or the Age of Enlightenment. Now, in a sense, we're all inculcated into the revolution, and that's why you see Masonic goals and aims being achieved by men and aimed towards by men who are not even Freemasons. Individuals, for instance, like William Sims Bainbridge and the transhumanist movement, what they aim towards through the use of neurotechnology, biotechnology, nanotechnology, mirrors a lot of the Gnostic ideas that were circulated within the Freemasonic Lodge. Yet, for all practical purposes, I don't think that many transhumanists are Freemasons. But it matters very little because they have subsumed the doctrine of Freemasonry, which was transmitted from the Lodge, disseminated on the popular level, and now have united it with their scientific knowledge to create this form of neo-Gnostic thought that involves the creation of a robo-man, if you will, in a post-human era. So that's essentially what we're saying. That the occult hierarchy of the Masonic Lodge remains intact, but the era of the Masonic Lodge as being really an active force in social dynamics, it's kind of subsided because there's no more need for them to do so.
There's going to be benign lodges, and then there's going to be lodges where you have the true believer, so to speak.
Exactly.
Oh, sure, but I mean that always helps because, as Pike said in Morals and Dogma, you want to keep some of the porch members out of the mix.
Absolutely.
So they can, and that's what I said. I mean, I don't know if I'm going to get a whole lot of hate mail, but I said, listen, I mean, and I have to tell you, I finally had the temerity to ask my uncle, who's 82 years old and has been a gem of a guy. I just asked him, out of conversation, I go, Uncle Frank, what were you doing with the Masons? And he said that he was, the master of a particular lodge. But he said, he goes, no. He goes, I was in the Blue Lodge, which means he never went beyond the 3rd degree. Some people would say it doesn't matter. They all know what the deal is. I'm not so sure about that.
Right.
And I cannot, in the lifetime I'm talking about since the 50s, guys, my uncle has never exhibited anything untoward, as far as I can tell. And now I am, 50, looking at him in his 80s. And, I mean, as far as I can concern, he's a Methodist, he's a churchgoer, what do you say about that? So, I mean, I'm not so willing to broad stroke everybody in Masonry as being aware of what really goes on in the upper levels.
No, absolutely not. We have a friend here in the area that we work with that's involved in Masonry, and we can tell just by the way he acts and the things that he has told us why he is involved in Masonry. And it wasn't some kind of diehard interest in occultism that got him involved. I mean, he went off to Vietnam. He saw some horrible things when he was over there. When he came back, he got with a wife that, helped him kind of bury all that stuff. And then when she died, he was lonely and needed another support group. And Masonry was there to give him a place to go and to talk with other guys and bond with other guys. And this is the kind of gentleman that, and I'm not just making this up. This is literally who he is and what he has done. And I speak from experience. You go out with him, and he's the guy that insists on buying your dinner.
We like that.
And then we one of our grandmothers. She was involved in Freemasonry back when she was younger, and you won't find a more dedicated church-going person who read her Bible, all the way through from start to finish several times over.
To give you an idea of the way that I think it works, I think we are all in agreement that, for instance, the United Nations is is an organization devoted to the very thing that we oppose, which is a world government. Nonetheless, though, the United Nations is so extensive an organization that it can't control all of its members, nor do all of its members adhere to all of its doctrine in its purest form. Mm-hmm. And I forget the name of a particular demographer, but recently a United Nations demographer has been kind of distanced from the organization because of his differences with other United Nations demographers who have been saying that the world is overpopulated, that we're headed for a population explosion. This one UN demographer said, no, the evidence more so supports a worldwide depopulation, a population implosion, and we're going to see a reduction in world population. And now, of course, he's been distanced by the organization. But this is analogous to the Masonic Lodge because you'll have it's an extensive organization. So many members. I mean, you can't count all the members on just one hand. But how many of them are really adherents to the core doctrine, and how many of them don't even know a letter of it? And some of them know some of the core doctrine, but only know it in very diluted form. Some people are familiar with a little bit with the mystery religion elements of it, but they have a very benign understanding of it, and they don't have the higher occult adept understanding that the smaller core of members have.
Gentlemen, understand that it would behoove the higher powers to have people who are in the dark about what's going on, because it would provide a mix, and those porch members, as Pike talked about, would not know and go about their business very well and provide a very good public service and a good PR front.
Oh,
right?
Yeah. Well, what do you? I mean, the Shriners Burn Center. Who can say that they haven't done good work? You have to admit.
You got it. That's right.
They've done some great work, but it's great public relations.
You got it. That's a wonderful example of what's going on. Now, I'm going to morph into one last thing. I want to hit you with 9/11. There is a book called Death on the Nile, and we know that as an Agatha Christie novel, but it also now has been the basis of a supposedly factual book that came through the library, and I had to laugh because I did a scan of the book jacket. And if you can imagine this in your heads, all right, think about two pyramids on the Egyptian Valley with the gossamer images of the trade towers behind each one, okay? Not as formidable as, in other words, we've got the two pyramids up front very much, solid, but behind them, like a ghost image of the trade towers behind them with a blue sky, and it's called Death on the Nile. Now the thing is this, the book is a hit piece on Arabs, like the Arabs did it, all right, but when I look at that book jacket, and I will send you an image of it so you can see it, and I know you're going about this blind, I understand that, but with the pyramids in the front, and the trade towers and the ghost image behind them, I look at that as a Masonic little wink as to that's what 9/11 was all about. All right, now saying that, and I just we're talking this out like a bunch of guys sitting around, whatever, because we've not talked about this before. Do you believe that 19 Arab hijackers pulled off 9/11?
Well, the thing about it is that with these Arab hijackers that were involved, Mohammed Atta, who was the lead hijacker, had received, according to the Times of India, $100,000 wired to him by the head of Pakistani ISI, Mahmoud Ahmad. And ISI, most people don't realize this, is a surrogate of the Central Intelligence Agency. So, no, I don't believe that they pulled it up. Now, I do believe that they were involved and that the hijackers were on the plane and did pilot the planes into the building. That being said, to think that they were at the center of the onion, just this group of hijackers with no support whatsoever from the hollowed halls of officialdom, some national government, that's a ridiculous claim to make.
Do you guys think that they actually were in planes?
Pardon?
Do you believe the hijackers, quote, hijackers, were in planes?
I believe they were. I know that there's a lot of speculation out there to say that they weren't. The problem with speculative questions is that they lead to a lot of confusion. Mm-hmm. Let's stick to what we do know. Here's what we do know. The CIA's Milton Beardman claimed that at no time did the CIA train Arabs to fight the Soviets. Bin Laden obviously believed that too, because he declared that he saw no evidence of American help. But this was because the ISI was used as an intermediary, and Bin Laden's organization, the Maktab al-Qadamar, or the MAC, was nurtured by Pakistani Inter-Service Intelligence or Agency, or ISI. And that organization, in turn, acted as a conduit through which the CIA would conduct a covert war against the Soviet occupational forces. And although the Afghan war ended in 1989, bin Laden remained on good terms with the CIA. In fact, the very government from which Osama received protection and support, the Taliban, was on the payroll of ISI. And it's interesting also to note that Robert Gates, who was the DCI at the time of all of this, he came forward and admitted that CIA had cooked the books concerning the Soviet Union's power, how powerful they were, so as to justify them continuing support to Osama bin Laden, and thus to make it look like support to these Afghan rebels was necessary. So and so the reality was that Osama bin Laden and most of those Afghan rebels were in fact obsolete to the fight against the Soviet Union. So that tells us, Robert Gates' admission tells us that Osama bin Laden's network was being funded and built up for something else, which we see what that something else was with 9/11. It was a pretext for creating this war on terror. In addition to the support of the agency, Osama bin Laden received protection from the Clinton administration, because from 1996 to 1998, Sudan offered Bill Clinton the ideal opportunity to apprehend bin Laden and prevent future terrorist attacks, and instead the U.S. pressured Sudan to make bin Laden leave, even though the Sudanese knew very full good and well and let the Clinton administration know that he would be more effectively monitored in the Sudan. And the Bush administration also protected bin Laden by thwarting the attempts of FBI agents to investigate the bin Laden family's connections in Washington to the World Assembly of Muslim Youths. And in particular, the FBI were concerned with Abdullah bin Laden's involvement in that organization. And that organization, the World Assembly of Muslim Youth, has had ties to Muslim cultural and financial aid groups, and these groups in turn had ties to terrorism. But the Bush administration didn't care about that. They told the intelligence agencies to back off from the investigations involving other members of the bin Laden family, to back off of the Saudi royals, to back off of possible Saudi links to the acquisition of nuclear weapons by Pakistan. And so what you have from all of this, what all this evidence points to, is that it wasn't 19 terrorists being coordinated by a man suffering with kidney problems hiding out in a cave somewhere. That's not the center of the onion with 9/11, and nor could it have been. It calls for a tremendous intelligence and counterintelligence apparatus to pull something like what we saw on 9/11 off, and the evidence points towards there being the hidden hand of those of certain individuals, not the government as a whole, but certain factions of the government being the hidden hand guiding and shepherding these guys.
I don't in any way, shape, or form get heavily, as we talked about earlier in this evening, about this administration for being, presiding in the Oval Office while this happened. I don't think this is a Republican thing. I think it's a governmental thing.
Absolutely.
But do you believe that this administration, as Clinton's did with the Murrah Building bombing in the 1993 WD, well, actually that was not. That was in a transitional stage. That was from Daddy Bush to Clinton, the 93 bombing of the World Trade Center. But Clinton presided over the Murrah Building bombing, and also what else am I looking at? No, that might be it, right? For Clinton.
Yeah. Well, yeah. It happened under Clinton. As a matter of fact, Clinton would admit to a journalist that the bombing of the Murrah building, that the whole OKC thing was in some respects a good thing because it galvanized the people behind his administration, and that was he was very blunt and honest with a journalist on one occasion about that fact.
The other event I'm thinking about, I've now captured it in my limited brain capacity, and that is Waco. Waco happened under his watch as well.
That's correct.
All right, so we have Democrats and Republicans presiding over certain events. But I would say this, so as I look at it, I'm not blaming any party.
No.
I'm just saying government moves towards this direction. But I am intrigued by this. How can you tell me that 19 hijackers were in planes that day? Can you put them in planes?
Well, what we have is we have a tremendous amount of intelligence that in monitoring where these guys were closely tracked for years in advance, and I personally believe that they were in the planes. My gripe, my primary problem, and my primary complaint is that given the fact that they were so closely followed, that they were so closely surveilled, and so closely tracked, why were they not stopped? I mean, we have Echelon, we have Carnivore, we have wiretaps, we have all of these different ways of surveillance at the disposal of what was then a $30 billion intelligence community. It seems to me that they were picking and choosing which terrorist events they were going to prevent. And in the case of 9/11, it was decided to shut the national security apparatus off and to allow it to happen because it was politically expedient for one or more faction of the elite.
And in fact, if I may also add a
Sure.
little something there, I wouldn't necessarily call the hijackers. I wouldn't call them radical Islam. Jeremy Glick's father, who was aboard one of the planes, noticed that the hijackers were wearing red headbands, and this sort of iconography and sort of this sort of clothing normally accompanies Marxist radicals, and it's for quite some time Marxism has made strides in co-opting the Arab world, and so it appears to me that this would be something of an intelligence project where a radical Marxist group serves socially and politically expedient interests, and the administration simply shut off certain portions the national security apparatus that could have prevented it from happening.
It should also be noted that Mohammed Atta, as well as several of the other hijackers, had been spotted at strip clubs, and a Muslim, a devout Muslim, they wouldn't be caught dead in a strip club. So this all works against the idea that this was somehow a result of Islamic beliefs. I don't see that as being the center of the onion.
All right, hold on a second. Let me tell you this, and I'm not ambushing you, but you raise a good point, and this is why I want you to at least countenance what I've found. Okay?
Sure.
I don't believe there were 19 Arab hijackers in any planes. I believe there were 19 Arab-looking guys that acted like jerks in strip clubs and flying planes everywhere in Minnesota or Florida and whatever. But I don't believe that anybody can put them in a particular plane. Now, what I'm going to do is this, and this is just an example of what's going on. Okay? I'm going to give you an article from the New York Times on 9/12/01. So this is the day after 9/11. With regard to Jeremy Glick, okay, guys?
All right.
It says in the New York Times, the headline is, "On doomed flight, passengers vow to perish fighting." And it says, in a series of cellular telephone calls to their wives, cellular is a key word there, 2 passengers aboard the plane that crashed into a Pennsylvania field instead of possibly toppling a national landmark learned about the horror of the World Trade Center. Okay, now this is key. From 35,000 feet, they relayed harrowing details about the hijacking in progress to the police, and they vowed to try to thwart the enemy to prevent others from dying, even if they could not save themselves. And one of these individuals was the husband of Elizabeth Glick of Hewitt, New Jersey. And she goes on about the conversation she had with Jeremy on a cell phone at 35,000 feet. And I'm going to tell you guys, my wife and myself separately have tried to make cell phone calls at 35,000 feet. You can't do it because the technology goes up to the towers and you're above the towers and it doesn't go down. But here's the interesting point. After Elizabeth Glick gave this account of the cell phone calls at 35,000 feet, a day after 9/11, 2001, the Times, she does this reminiscence of Flight 93, What We Never Knew, in the September 2004 Reader's Digest issue. And she says, now you have to understand this, she's recounting a conversation with Jeremy, okay? But she also pops back in and talks about, herself. So understand that we're going back and forth between her paraphrasing Jeremy and also introducing her own thoughts. And here's the paragraph. It says, and she's talking about Jeremy right now. She says, I can see a river, meaning Jeremy. We're flying high. I think, we're high up. But you can see it's definitely rural down there. That's the end of the quote. This is Elizabeth. He said there were maybe 30 or 35 passengers. He was calling on a seatback phone, not his cell. I'm going to end it right there. People can go look for it themselves. In the 2004 Reader's Digest, Elizabeth Glick's remark that he was on a seatback phone. I would also tell people to go to the New York Times on September 12th, 2001, and listen to her to go on about how Jeremy talked to her on his cell phone from 35,000 feet. Now, all I'm going to say, guys, is there's a lie here. I'm not blaming Elizabeth. I don't care if the government's involved. But we got them going on ad nauseum in the New York Times about cell phone calls, and she comes out in Reader's Digest 3 years later and says it was a seatback phone. Do you think we have something a little fishy here?
Well, yeah, I mean, like, it's definitely something to be looked into. I'm careful with those kind of things because they're speculative questions, and they have a tendency to go off on trajectories that could be non-productive. Let me just say this: we have enough evidence now that the government knew and that the government could have stopped it. For instance, we know that in 2001, during the summer, the National Security Agency had intercepted communications between Khalid Mohammed and Mohammed Atta, and that they did not share those communications with anybody. We know that Nawaf al-Hazmi and Khalid I have a hard time pronouncing his name,
okay.
but Al-Mihdhar, that the CIA, that the NSA, and the FBI had been watching those two particular 9/11 hijackers since at least 1999, and these different hijackers were watched very, very carefully and very, very closely, and you can't believe what the government says about there being tensions between the different agencies and an unwillingness to share information that prevented them from using all of this information to capture those guys and to prevent them from having pulled off these attacks, because there was a 2001 Rand Corporation study called the Study on the Preparation of the U.S. Army for Homeland Security, which says that the different organizations, the different agencies in the government were working very closely and very tightly together, and had a reasonably high degree of success in terrorism prevention activities here at home. So what you get when you put the picture together is you get this idea that they pick and they choose which terrorist acts it is they are going to allow to happen and which ones they're going to stop. And 9/11 was one where they wanted it to happen, so the national security apparatus got switched off.
All right. Well, I would say they were definitely in charge of the whole thing, and I would also say, that somebody proved to me that there was one hijacker on a plane. We know, like I said, that they were in different places and acted very much up so they could be remembered, so that when this whole situation broke, people could say, yeah, that's right, I remember that, which gives us some kind of credibility, but it doesn't put anybody in the cockpit. But be that as it may, we look at terror as it's happening now across the globe. It happens in Spain, it happens in London, it happens in the former republics of the Soviet Union, it happens in Bali. Do you believe that terror is an instrument that is being used in the Hegelian dialectic to get populations to ask their governments, reduce my freedoms, protect me? And
well,
go ahead.
It's basically used to cause what has been called by the Tavistock Institute Society, what has been called by different social scientists as social turbulence. It's used to reduce people back to basically cause people to regress and go back to a childhood-like state where they are very much pliable, where they are in a position where security is more desirable than freedom, and it is used for that purpose. It's very much a social engineering tool, and that's what I pointed out in my first book is to think of it as just being disenfranchised individuals who are violently letting their grievances be known. To believe it's just that is to be in error. This is social engineering. You have to look at what it does to people psychologically to understand and to fully grasp what it's all about, what terrorism is about.
Yes, and if I may add, it also qualifies as a form of what Paul refers to as surrogate warfare. And by that we mean it's a warfare, it's war waged by the criminal elite against the rest of us through surrogates. The old days of antiquity when the oligarchs were more overt, when the totalitarians and the dictators were more readily identifiable. The days of of them just openly unleashing their armies against the masses, and the masses coming against their armies. Those days are behind us, and have left with the rise of more democratic institutions and more representative Republican forms of government coming to the fore. So now the warfare is more covert. The war that the ruling elite wages against us is more covert, and they need to wage it against us through surrogates. And terrorism acts as a means by which this surrogate warfare is carried out.
But we don't want to sorry about that. We don't want to go in the trajectory that the militias of the mid-'90s went, where they basically blamed government for all the ills. We don't want to get going on an anti-government trajectory. So I do need to point out that while it's state-sponsored terrorism, and while government is certainly involved, those governments that are involved are merely being prostituted out to a group that exists above government, the power elite. These are individuals that exist above the government, and which and the governments are periodically used by these individuals.
That's agreed. There's no problem there. I just think in the time we've got, and you guys are going 3 hours, thank you very much. Oh boy, I got one over on you. No, this happens. I mean, and thank you very much. I don't take this lightly. Believe me, I don't.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, in these wee hours of the morning. But can we? What were you going to say?
Well, what I was going to say is you might have a point with those 19 hijackers. What I'm afraid of is that if you say it wasn't the men that it was claimed that they were, then like a Mohammed Atta, then the problem is that you get it so that people don't look into the background of who the hijackers were, and there's some very fascinating evidence there. Mohammed Atta, for instance, he was trained on a military base here in the United States, at a military base, when he was wanted for terrorist activities. Now, how do you have somebody that's wanted for terrorist activities being trained by the United States military? That doesn't happen. These guys, receive background checks and whatnot. So that's incriminating. So that you have to look into the background of these hijackers, and to say that these guys were not the hijackers and that it was somebody else, it takes away from the evidence.
No, what I'm telling you is that they were definitely protected, and people were told to shut up and stand down.
Sure.
And they went ahead, and they were really crappy pilots, and they did really stupid things in strip bars to be remembered. That's all I'm trying to say. It's the Lee Harvey Oswald situation from the Kennedy assassination, so that when the FBI, which I don't think is inept by any means, but when the FBI and everybody said, well, we didn't know, and all of a sudden they find these 2 pristine passports amid the horrible rubble, where you couldn't find a shard of glass that was intact in the trade towers, it was like, oh, now we know. And then they look back, and of course, the people, listen, this happened in Florida, and these guys in a flight school said these guys were jerks. They had no idea what was going on. They were like, why are we even here? But the thing was, what they did was they indelibly impressed the memory of their being there, so that gave them some kind of fake credibility being involved in that 9/11 day. In other words, they could be jerks and do all this stuff, but nobody can put them in the cockpit. And that's what that's what most of us believe, and that is, okay, you went out and you did your part, and you were there, and people could say, yeah, you were taking flight lessons, but in essence, nobody can put them in a cockpit of any of those 4 planes on that, obviously horrible day.
See, I would have to say that I believe that some of them were trained to know, to some extent, how to pilot those planes. Given the fact that many of the hijackers were trained at Rudy Decker's flight training school. And you see, to say that they didn't receive any kind of real kind of training would cause people to not look at the background of the flight training schools or look into their background. And Rudy Decker's flight training school is definitely something that people need to look into, because he has a background in intelligence, and he has also a background in a lot of criminality that points towards the intelligence agency, towards different intelligence agencies and whatnot. He also bragged about being of German descent, and there was a lot of things suggestive of a neo-Nazi connection there. It's also interesting to note that Mohammed Atta spoke with a lot of Germans and had a lot of contact with a lot of different German individuals while here in the States. And I'm afraid that people would not look into individuals like Rudy Deckers and look into the flight schools that these people were trained at, because they're being because they believe that they weren't trained, or
well, and it's most appropriate that you raise the JFK assassinations, and I think that's where we all agree. I think we all, for instance, agree that Oswald was not the gunman who took Kennedy out.
Agreed.
And that's the most important point, because the footage in the Zapruder film shows Kennedy's being shot from the front, and obviously not shot from behind, which would be what the position that Oswald had assumed. Likewise with 9/11, we could sit and nitpick the identity of the hijackers forever, but that really is superfluous, given the big picture. And the big picture is: was there government foreknowledge? Was there the possibility of intelligence operatives working this behind the scenes? And I think that we all can agree that certainly seems to be the case.
What kind of evidence in a court of law would get you a conviction? That's what we really talk about, and that's what I really.
I agree, but I would tell you this: that the government cannot, under those terms, guys, the government cannot bring in a conviction on anyone. And I don't know if we talked about this earlier, but the thing is, maybe I did say this, but I'm pretty sure I did. I forget, I've been on so many radio shows. But the thing is, if the government had the goods to substantiate their story, you would have it, traipsed out ad nauseum, so there would be no problem. The problem is that they cut up and got rid of the metal in the WTC on 30-foot, slabs out of there, and that's the reason why I think you found a little scrum, if you remember back, between the NYPD and the NYFD, because they're like, why are you taking this stuff away? The most horrific crime scene in American history, and you guys are just not letting anybody really analyze it, okay? Also with the Pentagon, if you had a plane there, let's go see the engines, where are they, what's the problem here? And in Shanksville. So my point is that if they had the goods, they would show it to you. They don't have the goods, and it's not there. So now we have to look at the fact that, okay, if this administration killed 3,000 people that day to advance an agenda in the Mideast, can we deal with that? I think we can. And if so, what does that say about where we're going and what we're doing? What do you think, guys?
Well, I would agree with you. I would certainly agree with you in that there is definite obfuscation concerning the investigation of these terrorist acts. We brought up earlier the Murrah building and the OKC bombing that took place under the Clinton administration. And of course, the remains of the Murrah building were basically demolished before any real sort of investigation could take place to substantiate the official report that a Ryder truck sitting outside the building blew it virtually in half. and the Benjamin K. Partons of the world weren't given the chance to go in there and really carry out a thorough analysis, because this would have proven disproportionate with the official report.
Yeah, once again, it's really interesting because the same structural engineer that they brought out to pronounce the OK City bombing not a problem, they brought to the WTC, and that was none other than Gene Corley. Same guy. But the thing is, let's remove ourselves from that. Let's take back, and we're running out of time. And you guys went 3 hours. God bless you. Thank you very much. But we look. I know. Well, cheaper than a dozen. But we look back at the whole thing, regardless how it was constructed, whatever. What are we looking at? Okay, and this will be our parting comments. What are we looking about with the relationship of today's, quote, governments towards the people? Are we fully now in the grasp of a satanic corporate elite?
Well, I'll put it this way. Back in 2001, I ceased telling people that the New World Order was coming. That used to be my line. That is no longer the line. It hasn't been since that year. Now I tell people that the New World Order is here. It's in its infancy stage, and it is rapidly heading towards puberty. And as we get closer and closer to puberty, we're going to see a lot of bad. We're just going to see the hammer come down harder and harder and harder, and the fist tighten up and clench a lot harder. But it should be noted that a fist has already been made, and so that's where I see us as being at currently. That's where we're at. We are already in the New World Order, and it's not a matter of stopping it from coming. It's already here. It's now a matter of how do we reverse what we are already in and pull out of it.
Yeah, and I'll also add this one, and then I'll pretty much shut up. But when in Florida, it's arbitrarily decided that we're just going to stop counting the votes. You know that you no longer have a government that is responsive to its constituency, and that might be stating it in euphemistic terms, but a government that's no longer responsive to its constituency is a pretty scary thing for me or for anybody to ponder, because any government that's not responsive to its constituency is also not answerable to its constituency, and can basically treat its constituency like whatever it wants to treat it like.
Listen, guys, we've done 3 hours, and I really, really thank you. I mean that sincerely.
Well, thank you.
And we ain't done yet. We've got things to do, and this will air, obviously, on December 30th, our last broadcast of 2005. If you're looking for Paul Collins, just go to Conspiracy Archive and do us a